So just to frame the topic here, Corey, what would you say in your experience are the keys to creating high availability service with large scale streams and tentpole events?
It's really all about the testing and where the audience is located and what are your providers for that, kind of that last mile to the customer. To me, it's really like you have to evolve your analytics really to figure out what is the customer experience, because if you don't understand what the customer is going through, you can never improve, right? So you'll never be able to if you never analyze the data, your customer base is constantly in this turmoil of, should I even bother with this thing anymore? Like if I go to a streaming service for like live concerts and it's constantly falling over, why would I go back? Why would I spend money to go watch a streaming concert when, I could easily go down the street and watch it at, 5 Point Amphitheater here in Orange County, or go somewhere else? Obviously, we want to all go back to, live events and concerts because it's kind of the main experience. But from a streaming perspective, it's really understanding, the audience experience.
I agree, and at the same time, taking in that, but at the same time, I guess the value of the data that we're actually pulling in real time to adjust is paramount at this point. I mean, and it used to be that the data was so slow to get to us that acting on it was always detrimental, but now actually it is literally being fed in, and we're being able to make dynamic changes and choices as the situation goes on. But at the same time, if you look at the foundation of where you're at and the people that you mentioned, the providers and so forth, and the people that are underneath, actually behind the scenes, that's key to it. Because if you don't actually have that foundational piece and they're not solid enough to actually provide the infrastructure or the inbound, then it doesn't matter how good the end is. You're not getting the initial piece in a qualified manner, in any type of quantity, any type of quality.
Oh, 100%. But I think until you know where your audience is at, you don't know what providers you're supposed to go after, right? So continental US or continental North America, you're looking at, obviously the typical providers, Akamai, Limelight, et cetera, if you're going to do your CDN distribution. But at the end of the day, what do you do for a global international audience? What partnerships do you make there? How is the client telemetry then influence making decisions on constantly connecting the customer to the best stream possible? And to your point, a lot of the data stream analysis that it comes out of a lot of the player tech today, is much faster than it used to be, and you can almost analyze in real time. But it's really the things around streaming delivery and load balancing across multiple CDN providers in different areas of the world that really hasn't changed much from the 3-tier architecture model of how an application is built in a data center somewhere. You have a load balancer, you have to spread out your application servers, you have to spread out your middle tier business logic and your databases. It's basically the same thing: origin, shield, edge. So it's the same similar concepts.
Oh, very much. I mean, and also as you mentioned, it's your audience and where it is. Who is good there. You're going to have to make a decision. Which provider is a dominant player in that general area, who's got the infrastructure, and are you actually relying upon them, or are you relying upon them and their partners, and do you actually know who their partners are? And then it becomes a question is, do you see that partner as a value?
Right. Well, a lot of those partnerships are only, as good as their peering agreements.
Exactly.
So it's at some point it's still a business conversation, on paper. Theoretically, you can get bits to anybody in the world. It's how you best, optimize those routes.
And I think, Corey, you referenced the concert industry, which I think had kind of an interesting run through the pandemic. And to your point, or what I noticed is, I think about 100 to 200 companies went out and got venture funding and kind of ran into that market thinking, oh, this is no problem, I can pull this off. But what we saw was, this is not an easy thing to do. And because you got some funding, I don't think you're going to figure out in 90 days or even 6 months. And people weren't contemplating things like redundancy and serving to, first of all, a big domestic audience, but potentially, given who the talent was, it could be a pretty massive international audience. And it was, I think, a lot of was a rude awakening for a lot of these companies, thinking that this was going to be an easy kind of, walk through a field and have a lot of return and success. And, there were also some pretty significant failures for anything that approached scale. So I think a lot of them didn't contemplate what you need to do to pull this off at scale. And as a result, I think that market went through a big growth. I think people were curious about who can actually pull this off and who can't. And I think that's now consolidated back to reality. Now that the people remaining in that space kind of understand the undertaking and what a best practice approach is to, one, to pull the experience off, but then to do it in real time, and 3, to scale it to a potentially pretty significant simultaneous audience.